Thanks for being with us here on Live Now from Fox. I'm your host, Christina Evans. So if you've just been here with us over the last hour, we just got that update from the NTSB as we're learning a lot more about the deadly San Diego jet crash. So the NTSB was able to give us this update, putting this tweet up on your screen. We heard from the investigator in charge there in this media briefing, Dan Baker. Now, it was a relatively short update, but they were able to answer just a few questions that many reporters had. So if you hadn't heard of this just happened a few days ago. We know that there was a deadly plane crash that wreaked havoc there in San Diego for many military families living in that neighborhood. This happened in San Diego's Murphy Canyon neighborhood, and it involved a small Cessna Citation business jet. So this is right next to the Montgomery Gibbs Executive Airport. It's just west of that crash site. So we know that at least 3 people were killed. 8 others have been injured, according to local authorities. But the impact of that crash exploded into a number of fires sparked by jet fuel and downed power lines. I do want to now bring into the conversation here to help us understand exactly what we learned there in that press conference and putting the pieces back together as well. Captain Ross Amer, the former pilot. Captain, thanks so much for being with us here on Live Now from Fox.
My pleasure.
All right, let's start off with the very basics. We heard that this was a small Cessna Citation business jet. I just want to get a sense of what this jet looked like, how it flies. Can you tell us a little bit about this aircraft?
This is one of the early versions of a successful series of private jets, the Citation 550. I believe this particular aircraft was built sometimes in 1985. So about a 40-year-old technology, but it's a reasonably well-built aircraft, old, but I'm not sure about the maintenance status of it being a small owner-operator. Especially, I noticed that it was registered in Homer, Alaska to a P.O. box number that usually turns on a caution light in my brain.
And so we're looking here at some of the damage that was left behind from this deadly plane crash, devastation all throughout the neighborhood. It did turn out that the people on the plane are part of the deceased, but no one on the ground was injured from that. Are you surprised to see with the level of damage that was left behind from this crash that no one else was hurt?
I normally don't believe in miracles, but this was a miracle because the way the jet crashed into just one side of the house and no one was hurt. As you know, this was sometimes in very early morning when everybody's home. Fortunately, we know nobody was hurt on the ground. And then, of course, the jet fuel running down the both sides of the street caught every car that was on that street on fire. So this was definitely amazing that no one on the ground was hurt.
All right, let's get into some of those updates as well that we heard from the NTSB. We do know that they were talking about some of the systems that failed. What can you tell us, Captain Amer, about those systems, and why is it so important that they're in place once these planes are in the air, especially these smaller private jets?
When you're operating into a small airport like Montgomery, and they don't have air traffic controllers 24 hours, obviously. They close the airport around 10 o'clock at night. And when the aircraft is operating in there early in the morning, like this was, about 4 a.m., obviously there's nobody in the control tower to tell you what the weather is. There is a automatic system, we call them AWOS for these small airports, that it's automatic weather observation, and it broadcasts on a certain frequency, tells you what the weather is. But unfortunately, at that moment, that particular system was out of service, and I don't know why. So the pilot did not know the actual weather in that airport. And as we know, there was pretty thick fog in Southern California on that early morning. So the pilot did not have a good understanding of the weather. he asks the air traffic controller, and air traffic controller gives him the nearby airport, I believe Miramar Naval Station, weather, which was similar, but it was very foggy and visibility was low, ceiling was low, and there were too many mistakes, unfortunately. I think fatigue was a huge issue in this case. You know, they took off just about midnight from East Coast, made a fuel stop in Wichita, Kansas, and by the time they get to the West Coast, they had probably been in the air for about 6, 7 hours. And then previous day, these all could be attributed to the crash.
And I want to ask you, while we're wrapping this up, but most importantly, we heard that there was no flight data recorder there on the flight, but they weren't sure if there was one in the cockpit, a voice data recorder. How critical are these two systems for the NTSB and those other investigators who are looking into this crash to putting the pieces together so we can truly get an understanding of what happened and why the plane went down?
Having the voice and data recorders in any airplane and any accident is extremely important, although it's not required for this old jet and small jet. So I'm not sure if they had one. If NTSB says there isn't one, then unfortunately there isn't. But we do have recording of the conversation between the pilot and the air traffic controllers till the last minute, basically. That would help the investigators. The other thing that investigators would look into is why this pilot did not choose to use the instrument landing system, instead use what we call a VNAV system that doesn't have, in this particular case, has the localizer or not the glide path. And this pilot, for some reason, went way below the glide path, striking high tension wires short of the runway. So there was, like I said, there are too many holes in that Swiss cheese that we talk about in aviation that attributed to this crash. Obviously, I don't want to speculate, but from what we heard from NTSB and listening to the air traffic controllers, there were just too many bad decisions on behalf of this owner operator. By the way, single pilot operation, that's another thing that raises caution lights. You know, when in the middle of the night, you're tired, weather's bad, another pilot could have actually in the cockpit would have really helped.
And it's just certainly a heartbreaking story. And again, we got that update from the NTSB, and we appreciate Captain Ross Amer for jumping on here to help us understand some of the jargon that came there out of that press conference. We appreciate your time as always.